Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisro Hawkins. Well, the United Nations Security Council is divided yet once again over the United States' missile strike on a Syrian airbase, finger pointing toward Russia, and of course North Korea back in the news again. They are threatening the use of nuclear weapons in retaliation if the U.S. makes a move on the country. But we start off first with an emergency meeting with the UNSC, that's United Nations Security Council, regarding the missile strike by the U.S. in Syria. An emergency meeting was called by several countries for the United Nations Security Council after hearing about the attacks in Syria. Even though emotions were running high at the meeting, global leaders are still at an impasse. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley addressed the council saying Assad's crimes against humanity could no longer be met with empty words. It was time to say enough. But not only say it, it was time to act, she said. Bashar al-Assad must never be allowed to use chemical weapons again.
Well, some said that the U.S. should have waited to discuss its actions with the Security Council. Others, like France and Great Britain, praised the U.S.'s actions. Now, French ambassador said that this problem will not be solved by military action alone, and the UK ambassador said that Great Britain supports the strike by the U.S. as an appropriate response to a heinous action against a brutal dictator that thinks that gassing his people is a legitimate step on the road to stability.
Well, Russia, on the other hand, criticized the U.S., saying that it was a flagrant violation of the UN Charter and has only helped terrorism. The Russian ambassador said the U.S.'s response has only strengthened the hands of terrorism. The attack came against those in Syria, that is the Syrian armed forces, who have been for all these years combating terrorism. The ambassador also accused the U.S. of being afraid of a genuine investigation, even find out if the Assad regime even used chemical weapons to begin with.
The Bolivian ambassador also reminded the council about the report of chemical weapons in Iraq, saying the motivation for going to war in that country and after that invasion, there was 1 million deaths, which launched a series of atrocities in that region. Could we talk about ISIS if that invasion hadn't taken place? And we know, of course, that the weapons of mass destruction that they claimed were never found, and he's using that as a comparison, and rightly so, because without the proof, it's just going against using pretext here and kind of breaking out.
Yeah, speculation. Well, Washington was quick to accuse Damascus of the alleged chemical attacks, even though the evidence is unclear to support such claims. The U.S. Secretary of State also said that Russia did not do its part to secure the chemical weapons in Syria. And soon after the chemical attack, the international community had already made up their mind as to who was to blame without an investigation. Fingers pointed at Russia for causing a block in the progress in Syria, and it was met with chastisement from Security Council members.
Michael Fallon, the UK Defense Secretary, said that Russia must show the resolve necessary to bring this regime to heel. Now, this latest war crime happened on their watch. By proxy, Russia is responsible for every civilian death last week. But Russia so far has only condemned the attack and has asked for an independent probe to find out what actually happened. Now, the U.S. claims that Assad launched the attack with Russia's blessing. Some are asking, where's the evidence to back those claims up? Well, they said that's classified. So, of course, they have no proof, but they're saying it's just classified.
Yeah, so all we have is their word. That's right. Pretty much it. Well, the U.S. or the Russian warship is heading, toward the USS Porter, which is the ship that launched the airstrikes, and that's in the Mediterranean Sea, against Syria. Trump now has to deal with Russia on the battlefield and their air defense systems that are capable of shooting down U.S. planes. Also, the fact that because Russian troops are intermingled with Syrian troops, a strike on any Syrian target could produce Russian casualties as well. So, Jeff, the pressure between the United States and Russia regarding Syria at this point is definitely going to reach a boiling point pretty fast.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani denounced the U.S. strikes on Syria, saying that the U.S. staged the attack based on an undocumented claim regarding chemical weapons in Syria, and that an impartial fact-finding committee must investigate the situation. President Rouhani said, if the invasion found that it was a terrorist attack, what will it do when the terrorists see that any time they use a chemical weapon, the U.S. will go for its support, of course, by attacking the government that the terrorists are fighting against. In other words, attacking President Assad's government. What will happen to Syria and the entire region? And of course, we know what's going to take place. They're just going to continue bombing it and destroying it like they have so many years now, with basically some of these cities basically reduced to rubble.
That's right. Well, it continued, what the Americans have done is not in conformity with international law, logic, or interests of other countries. Countries that encourage the U.S. to strengthen the terrorists are wrong. He also said that Iran believes that no country should support terrorist groups, but a number of regional and Western states have backed them. And lastly, he also warned European leaders 3 years ago that if they continue to support terrorists, they would face insecurity in their own capital. And as we've reported in the past, we've seen in London, we've seen in Paris, we've seen in several European countries terrorist actions in their right there on their
Quite
front
a few
yard.
of them as of late, attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while there is uncertainty and outright doubt coming from some in the international community concerning who is exactly responsible for the chemical attacks, America's position has remained unwavering. Now, YPN's Larry McGee has been following the story for us. Larry, amid all the latest speculation, has the U.S. opened the door for any possibility that this could be someone other than President Assad's government responsible for these chemical attacks?
Not in the least bit. And in fact, while the Pentagon has reserved making outright accusations with respect to Russian complicity, they are unmoved, however, in their stance that the Syrian government was behind the attack. Defense Secretary James Mattis stated in a recent press conference that there is no doubt that the Syrian government is responsible for the decision to attack and for the attack itself. Analysts say the U.S.'s missile response sends the message that the Trump administration will use force to accomplish their objectives in Syria, and reports are that the current administration is not ruling out further military action as well. The defense secretary has stated further that he is confident that the Russians will act in their own best interest, and there is nothing in their best interest to say that they want this situation to go out of control. With similar rhetoric, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson chimed in from Moscow that he hopes that what the Russian government will conclude is that they have aligned themselves with an unreliable partner in President Assad. Unfazed, however, President Putin continued to denounce the U.S.'s version of events as reminiscent of America's invasion of Iraq. The Russian head commented at a recent conference that this very much resembles the situation in 2003 and the war in Iraq. The Iraqi campaign was launched and it finished with the destruction of the country, the growth of the terrorist threat, and nothing less than the emergence of ISIS on the international stage. The former head of Russian intelligence also issued a warning that similar provocations might also be in the works for other areas of Syria, including Damascus, where parties are reportedly preparing to drop more chemical weapons and accuse the Syrian government. In response to such remarks, America has been threatening to increase Russia's burden of blame for the attacks, and American intelligence officials are reportedly now investigating Russia's role. The White House is also expressing suspicions that Moscow was aware of the attacks ahead of time and that its military carried out strikes intended to destroy evidence. The increasing tension between the two powers is undeniably evident as a high-level meeting between Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is slated to begin. Analysts believe that the secretary's message in the end will remain consistent, that the Trump administration is not the Obama administration, which was marked by its preference for diplomacy. Speaking from his recent pilgrimage to Italy, Secretary Tillerson urged for the nations to rededicate themselves to holding to account any and all who commit crimes against innocents anywhere in the world. Allegations regarding the crime of election tampering leveled against Moscow hasn't left the stage either. Investigations are still ongoing, and the standing president maintains that there was certainly no collusion on his part. There was collaboration, however, in Pisa, Italy, where many of the world's most powerful foreign diplomats gathered to discuss the question of how to move Russia away from supporting the Syrian government. Criticism came from Secretary Tillerson, who says that Moscow has aligned itself with the Assad government, the Iranians, and Hezbollah. And his question is that a long-term alliance that serves Russia's best interests? The relationship between the two administrations is believed to have taken a turn since the current president's campaign days, where ample compliments and prospects for improved relations seem to abound. Secretary Tillerson, who received a Medal of Friendship from Russia in years past, is expected to enter the high-profile meeting between the two nations, urging that Moscow stop propping up President Assad and prevent further use of chemical weapons. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, very interesting. Definitely tensions are continuing to rise between the United States and Russia, and I guess we'll see how this all plays out over time. Well, as heated words and provocative actions are exchanged between North Korea and the United States, there are exercises and ongoing measures being taken in the event war could break out between the two nations. Well, one current exercise is taking place was designed to test the combined management capabilities of the United States and South Korean air, sea, and land resources. The two nations are coordinating how they plan to distribute supplies such as food, fuel, and water in times of warfare to their combined forces.
Rear Admiral Cathal O'Connor tells reporters this exercise, in conjunction with the larger operation called Pacific Reach exercise, has been designed to ensure readiness and sustain the capabilities while strengthening the ROK, that is the Republic of Korea, and the U.S. alliance. Now, however, exercises such as these, while ongoing for 2 months now, are a huge irritation to North Korea, which most of the things that the U.S. is doing in that area has been irritating to North Korea.
And I'm sure they don't like them being that close in the Pacific region at all, but being literally right in their basement, with South Korea being just to the south of them. So I'm sure that's got them on high alert. Well, in light of news that the U.S. would be sending several of its carrier ships to the peninsula, North Korea is viewing the U.S. invasion as reaching a serious phase. A North Korean newsreader said on state television, "We will never beg for peace, but we will take the toughest counteraction with powerful armed forces against provocateurs in order to defend ourselves and stay on our own chosen path."
As the joint military exercises began last month, North Korea fired 4 Scud missiles to give warning to the U.S. and South Korea. Now, there is, of course, a possibility that more missiles will be launched. South Korea's acting president expressed his concern at the recent meeting, saying it is possible that North Korea may wage greater provocations, such as a nuclear test that is timed with anniversaries, including the Supreme People's Assembly. And of course, that's where they like to show they have the military parades and show their weapons and so forth. So he's saying that at the same time here, we could be expecting another test.
All right. Well, as a side note, Jeff, the Supreme People's Assembly, it actually meets a few times a year, typically to set budgets, overhaul cabinet organizations, and rubber stamp directives from the all-powerful Working Party of Korea. Well, the next sitting coincides with the 105th birthday of the country's founder, North Korea's founding father, Kim Il-sung.
In 1994, the U.S. had been on the brink of war with North Korea over its threat to go nuclear at any time. Now, today, scholars say we're at the highest point of tension since that time, which is leaving a lot of people feeling uneasy. While these events aren't anything out of the unusual, they're out of the usual for either side, the unpredictable nature of U.S. President Donald Trump adds a new dimension to things. So they've been to this stage before, but now with the new president, people are a little bit more worried here. And of course, he's made a statement that North Korea better be careful, what they're doing.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of people wondering what kind of situation could we have when we have two leaders who are kind of unstable in what they're going to do in regards to war or retaliating against someone else who might make a preemptive strike. Well, large military exercises are only a part of what is being done to protect and prepare for war with North Korea. As dawn breaks over the Korean peninsula, a U-2 spy plane taxis down the runway at Osan Air Base. Wearing a NASA-like pressure suit, the U-2's pilot will fly his 8-hour mission to collect intelligence information on North Korea at altitudes near the edge of space.
But that's not all that goes on at Osan, which is less than 50 miles from the Korean peninsula. CBS News was given a rare glimpse into the air base's activities. One airman told the reporter, "It's a constant tempo. We're very busy all the time. In the last 10 years, we've been the busiest we've ever been in this airplane." Now, the base's slogan is "Ready to Fight Tonight," and that, of course, is because they know it could go down that quickly.
Interesting. Well, Colonel Andrew Hansen concurs with that slogan, explaining everyone on the installation has to know very quickly where they need to go, where they need to have their gear, but most importantly, what role they do in a war-fighting environment. The base is on constant alert. Patriot missile batteries are lined up to defend the base from North Korean ballistic missiles, and preparations for chemical attacks are ongoing, and air crews are always sharpening their combat readiness skills.
Now, the news crew was given special access to the Air Operations Center, which is located deep underground. It is the place where North Korean missile launches are first detected. The facility is so vital to success that war planners have said it's the #1 target of North Korea if hostilities break out. Now, the American and South Korean operators get a very detailed view of the threats, but they only have minutes, and yes, you heard that right, minutes to react to these threats. One Lieutenant Colonel Mike Sward is confident in the capabilities of his team and those spread throughout the peninsula, that they are ready to respond if needed at that moment's notice.
And even with the seeming continual failure of North Korea's missile launches being only 50 miles away, I'm sure that they would have something that could reach that base pretty quickly. Well, one thing the American commanders all say is their primary mission remains the same, to be deterrence, but they are ready to act if necessary. One scenario was given by NBC News national security analyst Jeremy Bash. If North Korea launched a rocket and we did not know whether it was a satellite or a warhead on top, we, the United States, would likely try to shoot it down. In response, North Korea will try a number of things, in part by sending artillery fire into South Korea, and right away, you have a major conventional war on our hands.
While the attitude of the 28,000 plus American military personnel in the region has not outwardly changed, the level of tension has increased tremendously. U.S. Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral Scott Swift commented, "I've never seen greater concern from a regional perspective of the threat that is being posed by North Korea." And as a side note, Katan, Admiral Swift, he's been serving in the Navy for 40 years, almost 40 years now. So for him to make the comment that he's never seen a greater threat in that area, that says a lot from somebody with that amount of experience there. Yeah. Well, because of the serious threat, the U.S. Air Force has contingency plans. In the event of hostile aggression, they would bring in other squadrons from different bases around the Pacific area.
Whereas the Supreme People's Assembly sits in Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un, also known as the Supreme Leader, sits before them. And standing behind him against statues of his father and grandfather, the former leaders of the modern-day North Korea. The symbolism makes the point clearly that the third generation, like his predecessors, holds absolute power in North Korea, as well as its growing nuclear arsenal. And many view that arsenal as the main reason for a potential showdown between the U.S. and North Korea.
Well, the rhetoric has ramped up after North Korea launched more missiles. The U.S. has now moved warships, including the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson, off the Korean peninsula. Now, that move then prompted an angry response from the North Koreans. Pyongyang called the U.S. move a reckless act of aggression, and the government issued this retaliatory statement saying, in part, if the U.S. dares to choose a military option, the DPRK is willing and ready to react to any mode of war desired by the U.S.
Interesting. Well, in the war of words, President Trump responded by tweeting, "North Korea is looking for trouble. If China decides to help, that would be great. If not, we'll solve the problem without them. USA." In a second tweet, I explained the president of China that a trade deal with the U.S. will be far better for them if they solve the North Korean problem, end quote. Now, obviously, Trump is putting pressure on China in hopes of basically finding a strong ally in that area.
While it is known that China is North Korea's only significant trading partner, they have not made it clear how far they are willing to go to help rein in Pyongyang. Now, China hasn't even alluded to whether it believes economic pressure would work at all. Well, one thing is clear, tensions on the Korean peninsula are at their highest level in years.
Well, on top of U.S. warships off the Korean coast, President Trump has ordered a missile strike on the Syrian government just days before. No doubt this could be perceived by some in North Korea as an indiscreet warning, but the newsreader on Korean Central Television recently made this statement: "We are not intimidated. North Korean state media is warning of a nuclear strike if provoked." So even though they're on the verge of nuclear war, even though they see the United States surrounding them in the peninsula of Asia there, in the south, in Japan, and in the Pacific Ocean, Korea say, we're not intimidated. We're going to do what we want to do.
Well, as we can see, the nations are angry and nuclear wars will take place in this generation. Now, as all the technology increased in these last days, the character of mankind has certainly decreased. No peaceful solution is ever explored, only the ways of war and retaliation. Even though the teachings of Yisroel Hawkins have reached the entire world in these last days, mankind has still chosen to follow the ways of the gods. Well, you can come out of the ways of the gods by contacting the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisroelhawkins.com, and www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget also, for the latest and best resource for studying your Holy Scriptures, the Yisroel Says and the Ask Yisroel program. You can find that by simply going to www.yisroelsays.com and www.askyisroel.com.
We'll get ready to stand and cheer because up next is Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.